Welcome to A Ride on the Outside. MMA is full of people on the inside, but what about the ones that watch from beyond? Welcome to the MMA Outsiders with Tom Albano and Zain Bando on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
The MMA Outsiders is once again back in your life. Tom Albano here with Zain Bando. Episode number 8 is here. We've got plenty of Bellator to talk about with Bellator 285 last weekend, Bellator 286 this weekend. We've got Floyd Mayweather to talk about. We've got Conor McGregor to talk about. We've got UFC Vegas 61 coming up. It was a little weird weekend for you not having much major MMA content after Bellator?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird, but for those of you guys who follow me on Twitter and know my presence pretty well, I'm a massive football junkie, both college football and NFL. My undergraduate university, the University of Illinois, played on Thursday night, and then Northwestern played on Saturday night. So it was nice to get a little bit of a break from MMA to focus on some other sports that I'm passionate about. But to get back to the real crux of everything, going over that Bellator card, I just want to quickly get your thoughts on, Bellator's return to Dublin. There's this constant trend when Bellator seems to go international. The cards just feel bigger. They feel like they mean more. They're more significant. Like, you just feel like you're a part of a Bellator international card without even being there. And I felt like that's what the 3 Arena kind of was on Friday afternoon in the States. And I just wanted to get, your thoughts. Yeah, Peter Queally did lose to Benson Henderson, and it was unfortunate for a lot of the people in attendance, I'm sure. But I just want to get your thoughts quickly. Should Bellator consider making international cards more of a priority? Because it seems like the unofficial or official home of Bellator, if you will, if you want to call it that, is the Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut. And of course, right behind it is the Forum. And then, of course, they've done MSG a couple of times. Would I put that in their top 3? No, just because of inconsistency. And COVID obviously did not help that cause whatsoever with going back to MSG. They used to do that show in June a couple of times, or they did that on a few occasions, but they haven't really found consistency in New York. So I just wanted to get your quick thoughts on, is Ireland, or is Europe, I guess, the most important market for Bellator to really hit right now? Obviously, they've done Italy, they've done Japan, they've now done Ireland. Where do you think that whole venue discussion really sits right now?
I kind of agree with you. Now, obviously, like you said, their base is in the States. Their headquarters, I believe, is in California, and they run the Forum. They run the Mohegan Sun quite a bit. But I do agree that I feel like they should hit international cards more often. I mean, the UFC has, in 2022, the UFC has done more international outside of the U.S. cards. Certainly not to the pre-COVID levels, but they have done more. But Bellator seems to get a hit every time that they go outside of the U.S. Like you mentioned, the crowd in Ireland last weekend was absolutely nuts. It had some energy to it, like real over-the-top, quite a fun energy. And, it's kind of similar when they go to London. Japan, you mentioned Japan. I would love them to run another Bellator Japan event, like how they partnered. The RIZIN's their partner, and they did a Bellator RIZIN kind of super card at the end of 2019. I'd love to see something like that again. Australia, Bellator. Has Bellator ever gone to Australia? I don't think they've gone to Australia.
Not that I can recall, but I was gonna counter you on one point you made in terms of the UFC going international and not getting back to pre-pandemic levels. In case you forgot, it wasn't too long ago that they've had two massive London cards that I personally feel like have been at the level of pre-COVID. Well,
That's not Zan. That's not what I meant. I meant the number of events that they
oh
do.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Like they were in Copenhagen in September 2019.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood it as like atmosphere. Yeah, you're right. They've not done enough of those from a UFC standpoint than they probably would have hoped. So yeah, I see where you're going with that.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned previously, Queeley losing in the main event was obviously not what people paid their money to see. Um, obviously, we both feel, we're just kind of going off of, when the fight was over, that we didn't think it was that great. It was quite underwhelming. Um, just briefly, do you keep putting Peter Queeley, in Ireland, and is that going to be where he continues to fight? Do you think they're going to try to expand him a little bit more? And
I think they're going to keep him in Ireland. I think they're going to try to him, and I think they're going to try to keep him as slowly build his home base. Maybe Gallagher, occasionally will still fight in Ireland. Although I think Gallagher, they're ready to try. I mean, they've had him in the States, but like I think
personally,
he's not there yet.
I think he's ready for a main card fight. This is Gallagher I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's ready for a main card fight at MSG whenever they want to do it.
I'd be down for that. We'll talk more about Bellator a little bit later in the show, but I would be remiss, first of all, to say make sure to hit that like button, make sure to subscribe, ring the bell when you subscribe. That way you get notifications for everything here on the Empty Bench Network. I'm Tom Albano. You can find my work at Fansided MMA, and you can find Zan Bando's work at bjpen.com. But we would be remiss, Zan, if we did not start this episode off with a story that has recently developed, was first reported by Aaron Bronstetter of TSN, and James Lynch has another fellow MMA aficionado has called a story that deservedly needs a lot more attention, and that is that a report that Conor McGregor is the lone fighter on this UFC roster who has not been tested by USADA in 2022. Now, those of you who are not in the MMA know, USADA is the anti-doping partner of the UFC. You see USADA tests a lot of the Olympic athletes in America, and they are also responsible for the testing of UFC athletes. And according to Aaron Bronstetter, I'm going to read from his report here. Of all the athletes on the UFC's active roster prior to August 1st, 2022, Conor McGregor is the lone fighter yet to be tested this year by USADA. All active UFC athletes under contract are subjected to year-round testing, which includes fighters who have not competed for more than 8 years who have opted to remain in the program. Conor, if you remember, Zan, was last fought in July 2021, UFC 264. Broke his leg in the opening round of his trilogy bout with Dustin Poirier. Now, McGregor is still, as the report says, McGregor is still on the UFC's roster page. He's ranked number 11 at lightweight. So, as much as we had that little tiff in our intro episode about McGregor possibly retiring and then unretiring just a few days later, once again, he has not retired. And the athlete, there's like a database of athletes being tested, and we have seen fighters like John Hathaway, Travis Brown, and Sheldon Westcott, who have not competed in the division according to the report, who have been tested this year, but we have not seen Conor McGregor tested. McGregor's last recorded test was a sample collected during the third quarter of 2021. I assume maybe a little bit after the trilogy bout with Poirier. So, Zan, I want your thoughts on this, because the first thing that I thought when I saw this story, I was getting Brock Lesnar flashbacks. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm talking about, Brock Lesnar was inserted into the UFC 200 card as kind of a surprise announcement where he was booked for the co-main event against Mark Hunt. got these kind of exemptions from these rules and regulations that USADA has put in, like you have to have a certain number of tests or have to be in the testing protocol for a certain number of months before a fight. And surprise, surprise, Lesnar popped for roids before and after. Lesnar popped before and after the fight. So, Zain, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that report myself, and isn't the policy that unless you're retired, you have to test, right?
Correct.
So it leads me to believe a couple things. There is, and now we don't know this for certain, but if I were to guess three things about this story, this is what I would guess. Number one, he's actually retired and he doesn't want to like do the actual final formal announcement that his career is over. Number two, there's a fight in the works that we don't know about that is waiting to get finalized before they test him. Or number three, this is one of those tactics that the UFC likes to use to spin their narrative, which which has now come to light even during the pandemic. We're not here to talk politics, but if you believe in any sort of the stuff, the UFC kind of has an agenda of how they want to reach their audience. I think it could be one of those three possibilities. Also, we have to credit Aaron Bronstetter here, and as James Lynch has put this, and he put it very well. He described Bronstetter as sticking his neck out on the line because the UFC is a broadcast partner with TSN in Canada. That's where all their distribution rights are for all the pay-per-views and all the prelims and all of that. So for him to have that find with having such a deep connection to the UFC roster and getting exclusives with Dana White, you have to give him a lot of credit for finding this out and doing some more digging on this, because this is something that, while is breaking news, this is something that maybe or maybe not, depending on how long you follow the sport, could come as an unsurprising anecdote. So it'll be interesting to see how this story progresses, because, as you know, McGregor hasn't fought in over a year and a half. And who knows? There could be something in the works that we don't know about that's now potentially coming to light with his story. And as you know, the UFC doesn't get a lot of media availability outside of Dana White and the fighters. Sometimes you'll get Anik, but you don't really see like Jeff Novinsky, for example, who runs this entire operation, or as people like to call him, the Golden Snitch, get his dues at the media. So it'll be interesting if the UFC decides to blow this over, or if the media will continue to push on this story. I guess the last thing I'll say about this too is it wouldn't be a year in MMA without a very controversial Conor McGregor story, which has become the norm every year since about 2016. So I guess this is just another day in Conor McGregor news, and it'll be interesting to see what he actually does. And thankfully, this isn't one of those clickbait stories that isn't real. This is 100% legit, and there's evidence to back this up. So we'll see what happens. I just want to know what's going to come of all of this, and what, if anything, the UFC will do, and if the media will be wise enough to ask anyone about this.
Yeah. Going on your thoughts about, okay, maybe there is something in the works, and actually the TSN story points it out too. There was a rumor that Mayweather was looking for a rematch with McGregor in boxing, and we'll talk about Mayweather in just a second. But McGregor actually, I think there was an Instagram post that Floyd put up about Floyd Conor too, and Conor actually commented on the post with a boxing glove and hashtag not interested. So I don't know why he wouldn't be interested when he, considering all the money he's going to make, but I know the UFC probably might not be too interested, because Dana, for as much as he loves money, doesn't like working with Showtime, doesn't exactly see eye to eye with Showtime and all their execs, including Steven Espinoza. So that's one end of it. About another fight in the works. I mean, the only thing is, why has he not been tested? Why hasn't he not been Travis Brown? Travis Brown has not fought since, I think, around the time of UFC 200 or UFC 213. It was July 16 or 17. It's been 5+ years.
Yeah,
he's still getting tested.
Yeah, and I mean, John Hathaway hasn't fought since 2014. So, and when's the last time you heard that guy's name?
So that's the thing. That's the thing. Something's not adding up here. Something is amiss.
What's crazy to me is, how are those guys even in the program when they haven't fought in God knows how long? That was like when I saw that tidbit, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense either. Why all this? I didn't know those guys still in the testing program when they haven't fought in almost 10 years.
And also random drug testing. Conor's name should have came up if this was random. This is like, I don't know, Zain, if you've seen these stories, that NFL player and MLB player has a big game, like the NFL player gets so many sacks in one game or has a big run, or an MLB player hits like two or three home runs in a game, and then conveniently the next day, we're gonna test you.
Right, exactly. But yeah, obviously it wouldn't be another day in MMA without a Conor McGregor story, and it'll be interesting to see how the UFC PR machine, if you will do anything or will not do anything about this. But knowing what we know about the UFC, my initial prediction on this is the UFC is either going to they're going to do one of three things. They're going to deny that this story is even true. The second thing they're going to do is say, if you want, and we're going to pull a Dana White line here. If you want to talk drugs, talk to Novinsky. Or the third thing that they'll do is they'll put out a blanket press release that pretty much regurgitates exactly what's on our screen with no other context, and maybe one quote from somebody we've never heard of. So, yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see, like you mentioned, more interesting to see if the media are going to press on this. If at the next post-fight press conference they say, hey, Dana, or hey, representative of Dana, what's going on?
Knowing, not trying to take a dig on anyone, but knowing the current state of the MMA media, I'm going to say that's probably not going to happen. So
this is going to be an interesting story that it is going to develop, and honestly needs developing. Like I said, something's amiss here. The fact that we talk all this time about Conor and he says, I'm retiring, I'm unretiring. The fact that we have stated on this show already that UFC could always use Conor McGregor. The UFC could always use one of those Conor McGregor paydays, and Conor McGregor could always use another fight for a payday, even though he doesn't exactly need it. Something's not right. That conveniently, he's the lone fighter to not be tested. Everybody else has, but not him.
True.
Random.
The only other thing that I could speculate on is maybe, just maybe, now I'm not saying this is true at all, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of months it comes out that Conor McGregor is trying to pursue professional wrestling, and maybe we can come back in a few months and we could say that we were right. But that's the only other thing I could think. If he's not interested in Floyd Mayweather, that's the only other thing I can. And also, if he hasn't been tested by USADA, there's no way that. I just don't see now how he would even be in talks for another fight, considering the current policy that they have. But knowing USADA and knowing the hoops that they like to have certain fighters jump through while letting other fighters get away with absolutely everything, that's also another possibility too. But I digress. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this story, and if anybody will say or do anything about it. Which, if I were to guess, I would say the answer to both of those questions would be no and no. So, yeah.
I mean, okay, I'll throw an interesting theory out to you, Zain. because
Okay.
you mentioned professional wrestling. So, wasn't too long ago that we saw a photo of Triple H and Stephanie McMahon posing with Nate Diaz, who is a longtime rival of Conor McGregor. Do you think in this coming WrestleMania season, so about a few months from now, when we start to get on the road to WrestleMania in Hollywood, maybe there will be a match? Even if it's not a match, maybe it's something like Conor McGregor is in the corner of one wrestler and Nate Diaz is in the corner of another.
It's an interesting theory, although I will stop you for a second because per every contract, Nate Diaz is in a 3-month negotiating period with the UFC where he can't talk to anyone. So we'd have to wait out. We'd have to wait that out and see what actually happens.
Well, fortunately, that would bring us to December, and that gives us a little bit of time before WrestleMania in April, and they have to start building towards everything. So
this is very true. You have a good point.
The interesting thing is going to be McGregor, because McGregor still is under contract with the UFC. Although, it's not this October, it's next October. Supposedly, he has a sunset clause that if the UFC doesn't book him, or am I thinking of Nate Diaz's contract?
No, you're thinking of Nate Diaz.
So McGregor, I'm curious of when the sunset clause in McGregor's contract would be.
Yeah, that's one I don't know off the top of my head. Because didn't he sign like a 6-fight deal in his last contract or something like that?
Something like that. So it's something like that. I can't find any pure information on that. Everybody was just talking about Nate Diaz's contract. So it would be interesting to see if, I'd say maybe it's just Nate Diaz who has the WWE run, because I would like that Conor McGregor would. It would be interesting to see if he would pursue the WWE route, but I don't know if Dana would necessarily let him, especially if it's going to involve something with Nate.
Yeah, and what's even funnier, speaking of that, is when Dana says, "Oh, that rematch is always going to be there," but at the same time, I don't really think about that. And it's like, dude, of course you think about that. There's no way that you can sit there with all the money that you have at your really, really, really nice mansion in Las Vegas. Mind you, I'm not trying to plug anything, but mind you, if you've not seen that barbecue video with Cooper and go watch it, because his backyard is awesome. But there's no way you can tell me that you don't stay up at night until 2 or 3 in the morning saying, "Oh my gosh, I wish we had that. We could have.
I wish we could have had. You had ample time, man. You had ample time,
and you didn't do it. And not only that, not only did you not do it, you didn't do it when the fight was still hot, and you disappointed every single fan on the planet by just continuing on with the divisions as if everything was normal, when it wasn't normal at the time. None of it was normal at the time. So I don't know. I mean, in my dreams, I can always think that maybe one day we will finally see the concluding chapter of McGregor Diaz 3, but at this point, I'm not very hopeful. And that news, by the way, leads me to believe that now that trilogy will probably never happen. So we'll see. We'll see.
I agree.
I really hope there is a positive outcome to this story, because I'm so curious what other things are missing from that story that people should probably know about.
Maybe we gotta get Aaron onto the show at some point to help us out here.
That would be a tremendous exclusive if we could potentially get it. That would be awesome.
Let's talk about I brought up Floyd before, and he actually fought this weekend, believe it or not. He was on the RIZIN card, RIZIN 38 in Japan, taking on Mikuru Asakua in an exhibition boxing bout. Now, this is the second time, Zain. So for those of you who don't know, RIZIN is the successor to Pride, in which we have a lot of Japanese MMA, sometimes we'll get into the freak show exhibition bouts. And this is not Floyd Mayweather's first rodeo when it comes to RIZIN, because I believe it was New Year's Eve 2018. He fought a kickboxer, and the kickboxer wasn't allowed to kick.
You sure did. I was also going to mention, for those of you guys who are newer MMA fans, RIZIN is the equivalent of you just had your appetizer, you just had dinner, you've already had dessert. If you want your midnight snack of MMA, this is where if you're a real OG MMA fan, you stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning like a bunch of other MMA diehards on the MMA Twitter spirit, and you watch RIZIN. Personally, this is not me. I maybe watch RIZIN once or twice a year. And by the way, I'm not sure about you, but this is one that I chose not to stay up and see. How about you?
No, I have no interest in this. I had no interest in watching Floyd Mayweather fight somebody who's not a boxer. I still can't get over that first one. At the end, okay, you're a kickboxer. We'll do a kickboxing exhibition match, but you're not allowed to kick. Isn't that just a boxing? But whatever, fight. And then Floyd whipped him. And now once again here, I think Floyd Mayweather stopped him in like 2 rounds.
What do you? Okay, Tom. Now I have to ask you this, because everybody online is going crazy. All the Redditors, the people on Twitter. Was that finish by Floyd Mayweather any sort of a was that finish by Floyd Mayweather any sort of a fixed fight?
You couldn't say that with a straight face. I couldn't. I wouldn't say it was fixed. It's just dumb.
Okay,
I wouldn't say it was fixed.
Did you actually think that the punch that Floyd landed Mikuru with was actually a legitimate punch that hurt him? As I'm curious, because I watched it a couple of times and I was very confused as to what exactly happened. I thought at first glance that he tripped and fell before watching the replay. How about you?
All right, you know what? I just got the video up, so let me have a look up here for let me have a look up here for a second. All right, let me see here. I don't know what to think about this. It looked like more of a headbutt, honestly, than a punch.
Yeah, shades of Floyd Mayweather versus Victor Ortiz there.
And no. Now I see the punch. That's a weird one. That's a very weird one. You know that emoji with somebody scratching their head? I'm like, that's me right now. What the hell? But this is why I don't take this stuff seriously. This is all just money.
Yeah, and what's even crazier is the pay-per-view was dirt cheap too.
Hold on a minute. I have to take advantage of the empty the bench soundboard that I have right now. This was all that this fight was.
That's true. He was I don't know how many millions of dollars he was making per minute, but apparently it was absurd.
Again,
and as far as I know, unless you were on an offshore, you couldn't even bet on it.
I mean, I don't know what to think of this, and I mean, it was just another Floyd, paydays for Floyd, just another way to grab all the attention that was possible. And now, Zain, he's gonna have another exhibition bout very quickly. He's gonna go back to the boxing ring, legitimately the boxing ring.
This fight against Deji, I'm actually excited about, because I'm actually excited to see how much shit Deji is going to talk before the fight.
I'm kind of curious to see how long Deji is actually going to go. If he's going to last longer than Mikuru Asakua.
Yeah, and I'm also curious as to where that fight's even going to take place.
I've heard Dubai. I have to double check, but I'll double check right now. But I believe it's Dubai.
That makes a whole lot of sense because a lot of very, very, very well off people are more than likely going to be there.
Because of course it would be in Dubai. Just throw the money everywhere. You know what? That's really the only thing I can think of when I talk.
Have it be during. I assume. Do we know a date in November of when that's going to be?
I want to say. Let me have a look. It would be on November 13th. It would be the day after UFC 281 at the Garden.
Yeah, assuming it's going to be during the day. Probably.
I assume so. I assume it would be daytime here in the States.
Who do you think is gonna? Is it another RIZIN event or could
no? It would be.
Or it would be Showtime have any involvement in this?
Let's see here. Let me read the MMA. Let me read the MMA fighting story. It is Global Titans and Mayweather. So I don't see anything that says what it's going to be on.
So
I would assume it would be Showtime.
Yeah, and then more than likely internet pay-per-view if nothing else.
Yeah. Let's see. I see TalkSport. Yeah, nobody really saying anything. I just assume it's going to be Showtime, unless it's an internet pay-per-view exclusive.
Okay, well, if you like free show fights, be sure to tune in November 13th for either the worst fight you've ever seen or one of the most hilarious fights you've ever seen.
Or both. Or just make sure if you're going to watch this fight, you watch some actual competition the night before with UFC 281.
Yeah, and not trying to encourage anybody's viewing habits, but it might be better to watch this fight while sipping an adult beverage. You know what I mean.
I mean, the UFC was the night before. November 13th is still a football Sunday. Who's to say people aren't already planning to have adult beverages in their hand?
That's true, but are people planning to watch the Floyd Mayweather exhibition bout on the same day as a full day of NFL right before the postseason? Probably not very many.
So. Probably not. All right. So after we got through all that, let's actually talk about the fights that are going on inside of a cage. So, as we mentioned, Bellator 285 took place this past weekend. Benson Henderson defeats Peter Queally, and Zain, that was just...
Yeah, it was...
I'm sorry. The highlights were playing in my head.
Yeah, it was an absolute snooze fest. If you like clinching against the fence and...
little action to go with it.
And if you like shades of UFC 149 and Sean Jordan, this is basically what this fight was. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to take a dig at him, but that fight at that particular card was absolutely horrible. Well, and so was this. But yeah, I was hoping for more, and I was hoping somebody would get finished, but obviously that didn't happen. And
that fight needed Yuji Shimada, the old Pride referee. Action.
No, it did. And you know what else it needed? It needed that one referee at that ACA card that stopped the fight from being too boring.
They needed the ACA commissioner. That's what they needed.
That's what that's right. That's what they needed.
I love the fact that president, the ACA head, did that. It's like now everyone is going to compare it. You know, every time there's a boring fight, the expectation is going to be that.
I just love how Dana quoted it as that was fucking awesome. And then afterwards he says, "Oh yeah, that leaves me for some pretty good ideas for next week."
You know, one of these days, Dana is just going to hop into the octagon and just stop a fight.
Yeah, I think he's been close a couple times more than not, where he's had to yell at some commissions to stop some fights. We digress. Where does Benson Henderson go from here after quite a dud of a main event over the weekend?
Yeah, that's a good question because I know we made mention about potential title shots before, but here's the thing.
I just don't think he deserves one at the moment.
Well, here's the thing, Zan. He's just coming off of a big losing streak. Earlier this year, I think was his first win in like 3 years. He beat Miles Jury in 2019, and then there were 3 or 4 fights in a row where he lost up until
which is nothing great considering Miles Jury is not the same Miles Jury from like 7 years ago.
So, but I mean, honestly, this might be a little bit of an interesting take, but Bellator. We talk about how the lightweight division across MMA is usually great. Bellator's is, yeah. I mean, you got Patricky Pitbull at the top. You have Usman Nurmagomedov, who are your clear 1-2. Musayev is an interesting shouldn't say prospect, but contender. Then you have Benson Henderson, who, like you said, not the Benson Henderson of old.
Musayev in the UFC one day. Whenever he becomes a free agent, don't be surprised.
I wouldn't be. Sydney Outlaw, who's interesting, but not at that top level just yet.
No, and he's not marketed very well either. If we're being honest.
No, I feel like Sydney Outlaw deserves better. Brent Primus. The only reason Brent Primus even is a former lightweight champion is because Michael Chandler broke his leg at Madison Square Garden, and then he held the title and never defended it until Chandler took the belt back from him. And now Primus is just usually a face on a Bellator International card. So good marketing on him.
Right. Yeah, that's what Bellator has been criticized for, is not building up their stars the way they should, minus AJ McKee, who we'll get to in a little bit when we preview Bellator 286. I just want to ask you this question. Mm-hmm. Because as you know, if you listen to Scott Coker closely, which I know you do, he's super optimistic all the time whenever he does media availability or any sort of exclusive interviews. Like after this weekend, like if you're Scott Coker, and let's just play president for a second. Like you expected this card to go well, and for the most part, until the main event, there were some exciting fights, and then that happened. Like if you're Scott Coker, how are you approaching this differently? Would be one of the big questions that I had coming off of this card and its outlook and how it will be remembered.
So here's my thing, Zan. I think Mr. Coker has the knowledge and the understanding that the main event was not well received. There were definitely some highlights. We'll talk about Yoel Romero in just a second. There were definitely highlights, but Benson Henderson was far from it. I think Mr. Coker has the understanding that Benson Henderson, yes, on one hand, is one of the stars of the promotion in the sense that he has the experience. He is a former UFC champion, was a UFC star at one point. But on the other, like we mentioned, this is 2 wins after a 3 or 4 fight losing streak. Now, credit to Henderson, those losses came to Michael Chandler, Jason Jackson, and Brent Primus. That's not the most terrible of losses, but it's damaging enough that he shouldn't be considered for a title shot. Now I believe Pitbull versus Nurmagomedov is the next lightweight championship fight.
For sure.
I'm not saying that as it is. I'm saying that I think that is booked. I don't know which. I forget currently which card that's going to be.
I believe is it not the Bellator Chicago card?
It's either the Bellator Chicago card or the December card. It's one of those two.
Are you checking?
So here's my thing. If that's the case, if you're Scott Coker, you're talking about Benson Henderson, former UFC champion, marketable, but not there for a title shot yet. what you could do, you could book him against Musayev, or you could book him against Sidney Outlaw. I know this is before 285, but Benson Henderson was smack in the middle between those two in the lightweight rankings. So you could book him against one of those two next.
Yeah, I think Sidney Outlaw is the better option. By the way, Pitbull versus Nurmagomedov is in Chicago, and as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I hope to be there.
Hopefully we get some good footage from. Hopefully you're there and we get some good footage from that.
Mm-hmm. Not only that, the main event is Nemkov and Corey Anderson, in case you forgot. So,
right, the light heavyweight Grand Prix final to Electric Boogaloo.
That is finally happening. We hope without any controversy.
We hope we actually get a winner this time. Let's talk about that co-main event, by the way, and if only to, give a round of applause to Melvin Manhoef, who, despite being finished in the third round, despite getting pretty dominated in this fight by Yoel Romero, a hats off on an incredible career. Zain, you mentioned it last week. Melvin Manhoef, one of the most scariest fighters when it comes to MMA and kickboxing. Some really scary knockout power, who delivered plenty of highlights, actually challenged for the Bellator middleweight title twice. And if we're being honest, that first fight with Manhoef and Rafael Caballo, Manhoef should have been the Bellator middleweight champion.
No, 100%. If it wasn't for, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if it wasn't for a careless mistake on his part, he would have won.
Well, the first fight was just horrific judging all around.
No, right. That's the fight I was thinking of. Was the second one and not the first one. But yeah, I mean, overall though, a great career. But hang on a second. Besides Melvin Manhoef retiring, which that's off to him on a legendary career with a lot of nasty knockouts. And for those of you guys who are newer MMA fans, this is a guy you have to go check out on YouTube. You will be mesmerized at the way he would knock his opponents out almost 20 years ago. But holy shit, Yoel Romero at 45 years old is still doing his thing. The former UFC middleweight contender mainstay, the former UFC interim middleweight champion, still doing his thing at 45.
He's got that dog in him. Quite literally, considering he was barking at the end of that fight.
Yeah, how massive do you think a Yoel Romero title shot would be for him? I know he just beat Manoff, who retired, but I think they could do some pretty big business if they put him in a title fight.
They're gonna try. They're gonna try everything. Now, my curiosity is, so Yoel Romero entered the rankings at number 7. Let me double check these rankings when they were last updated. I don't have anything here that says when they were last updated, but I do have on this ranking here as Yoel Romero was at number 7. And I guess he is going to be a light heavyweight fighter as intended, because I know there were discussions maybe he could drop back down to 185, although considering how it got towards the end of his UFC run, I highly doubt he could stay at 185. I think 205 is perfect for him.
No, he won't.
205 is perfect for him.
If he has smart people around him, he won't. So,
as far as a championship shot right away, I mean, as long as he's competing at light heavyweight, we still have to wait as on the aforementioned Nemkov Anderson 2 fight before we can get anywhere with that. So,
right, which regardless of who wins that fight, and I'm not just saying this from a biased perspective, there's no way that Nemkov Anderson fight does not suck. It's gonna
be great. I have high expectations for that.
It will be an excellent fight, and for those of you who are in Chicago, it's Bellator's first trip to Wintrust Arena, which I'm actually grateful for because it's bigger than Allstate Arena. It's newer, and the card alone will do well ticket-wise, I would hope, to where a lot of people, if not a sellout, that night for those two at the top of the bill. That should be tremendous. Oh, all I'm saying is the middle of November cannot come fast enough, especially that main event.
For
So
sure. I can't wait. And that Chicago card, that's going to be massive. That's going to be one of the couple of remaining big Bellator cards of this year. As far as Yoel Romero, Zan, about what's next, I mean, considering where he is in the rankings, maybe you give him somebody else. I mean, there is still your Grant Neal and Julius Anglikas at like 5 and 4. Although,
yeah, but do we really think that either of those guys?
no, well, Zan, let me throw this at you. What about Yoel Romero versus Ryan Bader or Phil Davis?
It's an old school UFC throwback. I'd rather see him versus Ryan Bader.
I think one of those two fights would be great, and then potentially you use Romero versus, say, Bader or even Davis as the number one contenders bout. Like the winner of that faces the winner of the Nemkov Anderson final.
Oh, for sure. I would be more than down to see it. We'll see if it actually happens. Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll go off of Bellator 285. We'll go on to our cards for this weekend. But speaking of rematches and speaking of championship bouts, this news coming in very recently: Deiveson Figueiredo, Bandon Moreno 4, the championship unification bout at flyweight, is being targeted for UFC 283 in January, which right now is scheduled is the UFC's first card of 2023. It will be taking place in Brazil, the home country of the champion, Deiveson Figueiredo. Zan, I think we already stated on this show we stated on the pilot episode after Moreno beat Kai Kara France for the interim title. I could watch this fight all day. Figueiredo Moreno 1 delivered with one of the greatest fights of 2020 that ended in a draw.
Arguably the greatest fight in the history
the flyweight division.
Not just the history of the flyweight division, but the greatest fight in the history of the UFC Apex, period.
Okay. Oh, the UFC Apex. Yeah, that's a very fair argument. I would buy into that argument. I would agree with it. Then you had Figueiredo Moreno 2, which was a completely different fight, in which Moreno submitted Figueiredo and became the flyweight champion, first Mexican-born UFC champion. Figueiredo Moreno 3, not on the level of their first one, but still exciting, with Figueiredo winning a controversial decision. So it's 1-1-1. This fight has to not only deliver, but it has to produce for us a very clear result. Who truly is the king of the flyweights right now in the UFC?
Well, this fight isn't for several months, but holy shit! Can January 2023 not come fast enough? These two are going to deliver that crowd in Brazil some epic fireworks to kick off what should be a banger year in MMA. My gut tells me right now that Bandon Moreno has his number. He probably was like he won fight number 3, and I actually think he's going to finish Figueiredo again. So that's just my early prediction. I'd have to do a deeper look on it, but
I agree. I agree that I need to do a deeper look on it, but you do kind of bring up a point, which I kind of bring. The one fight that was completely different was Moreno submitting Figueiredo. Moreno has the finish.
I mean, but could you imagine, Tom, if Deiveson Figueiredo turns the tables and finishes Bandon Moreno in the quadrilogy?
That would just be some poetic full circle
type shit.
Yeah. You took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, and that would maybe force Dean in the book of fifth one.
What's the WWE chant? Fight forever.
Yeah,
fight forever.
But yeah, this is one of those fights where I just feel like this is one of those fights that could easily take place in the future.
Wait. UFC 317, Figueiredo versus Moreno 8. UFC 337, Figueiredo versus Moreno 11. UFC 376, Figueiredo versus Moreno 15.
UFC 400.
UFC 500, Figueiredo versus Moreno 22.
Which by then the score would be somehow tied 11-11. Or excuse me, it would be like
10-2 or
10
10-1.
1. Yeah, and 10-1 or 10-2. But I gotta admit, if they stack this card the right way, that main event is going to be absolutely nuts. But I mean, just think about it. And I don't mean to digress, but the next upcoming 4 UFC pay-per-views are just absolutely like you can't even can't even do it justice with how good the next 4 to 5 UFC pay-per-views are. Pretty much what we're saying is there's never been a better time to be a mixed martial arts fan. There really is.
It really is, like it's funny you say that expression because there's always a time where we bring up that expression. Usually like in the summer months when the UFC is constantly putting out bangers like it did earlier this year with the UFC in June. And then we had that hot summer to UFC 276 and UFC 277, plus UFC 278 giving us one of the biggest upsets in MMA history. Can't even forget that.
No, you can't.
It's just there's always, there are times where there are lulls, and right now it wouldn't be, too bad of an argument that the past couple of weeks have been a little bit of a lull.
And we're still under 30 days away from the massive UFC event that's stacked as ever. That is UFC 280
in Abu Dhabi. Yeah. So this is going to be fun. And as you kind of mentioned, I wonder if Figueiredo versus Moreno 4 is going to be the main event, considering it's Figueiredo's home country, considering the fact that I don't think we've had a quadrilogy in the UFC, exclusively in the UFC at least.
No, I don't think we've seen that, but I do think, though, in terms of the main event, that the answer is yes, because at the moment they're going to plan to do Yuri and Glover in Vegas.
Right, because Yuri turned down going to Brazil. I do remember that.
Positive that if that fight was in Brazil, this would be slotted as the co-main event.
But considering that's going to be in Vegas in December, considering the fact that it's Figueiredo's home country, considering the fact it's an undisputed title fight, it's a champ versus interim champ, considering the history of these guys, and for the first time or a 4th title fight, I feel like the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, I'm hyping myself up that has to be the main event.
But what's even crazier is it's not like a 4th fight that like is undeserved. Like this is the fight that needed to happen based on how the series has gone. But Tom, could you imagine the inevitable? Could you imagine if for the second time in this rivalry that there is a draw in fight number 4?
Don't jinx it. I love this fight, but don't jinx it, please.
Maybe the MMA gods don't want us to have fun to kick off the year. I'm sorry. I did not mean to put the thought in your head, but I had to say it.
That's going to be playing in my head if that fight ends in a draw.
And then that exact laugh that I just gave is going to be playing in your head over and over and over and over and over again. But yeah, so that is the fight that is being targeted, UFC 283 in January. You don't want to miss it, and of course, there are more fights that I'm sure will be announced in the near future that we don't even know about yet. But knowing the UFC, that'll be coming eventually. We still have to get to the cards that are coming up this weekend. Mind you, we have 2 of them. The MMA train continues to roll, but this time we have a little bit more MMA to look forward to. If you were to pick, Tom, between these 2 cards, which one you would rather watch? Would you rather watch Bellator this weekend, or would you rather watch UFC Vegas?
So I actually want to throw out a challenge. I want to see if somebody's going to do this. I want to see if somebody is going to watch the Bellator this weekend, the UFC this weekend. Plus, we have an Invicta card this weekend. Plus, Zain, we have the second one championship on Prime Video card this weekend.
That's very true. We do.
Plus, we have Cage Warriors this weekend. So the plate is stacked in terms of MMA. And you know what's funny? The UFC card is honestly on the bottom, or towards the bottom rather, of all these different cards and their interest level. I mean, what is the one? I have to double check. What is the one on Prime 2 main event? It's Jingyan Zhang and Angela Lee for the flyweight title. What happened?
Oh, sorry about that. I was looking something up and an advertisement popped up.
Oh, okay. It's as I was saying, it's Jingyan Zhang and Angela Lee for the one women's flyweight title.
Oh,
and Super Bond's going to be fighting in a kickboxing title fight.
Of course he is. But who doesn't love watching Angela Lee fight? Is because of how young of a prospect she is and how she. But that's another thing that one needs to promote her more, and hopefully with it being on Prime Video, a ton of people will watch it.
Not just her, the Lee sibling, the championship siblings who are so young and have probably a lot more to develop and a lot more, to grow in this sport. Not just in terms of skill, but in terms of, marketability.
That is very true.
Not
wrong.
But we will start things off here. I would pick Bellator 286 as the card to watch this weekend. Let me get my Tapology tab up here. We've got an interesting one coming October 1st, this Saturday, in Long Beach, California. Our main event.
Can you share your screen?
Oh, it didn't pop up. There we go. In Long Beach, California. The main event, of course, as we mentioned, is Patricio Pitbull defending the Bellator Featherweight Championship against Adam Borks. So, Pitbull, he is arguably the face of Bellator MMA. He is one of the most winningest fighters in Bellator MMA. Yes, he did lose the championship to AJ McKee in the Grand Prix final, but he did regain it, all of it in a very controversial decision. And then you got Adam Borks, who lost in the Grand Prix, but has faced some interesting competition. If I actually go to the kid's profile, he has scored wins over Mads Burnell, scored wins over Jeremy Kennedy, Pat Curran, Aaron Pico. His one loss is to Darian Caldwell, which is not a bad loss at all.
No, not at all, considering where Darian Caldwell was in his career at the time.
That is former Bellator bantamweight champion.
100%. I gotta say this. Adam Borks, if he can start this fight fast and keep it on the feet, we might have some mass chaos. Because I don't know about you, but it would be interesting for parity's sake if we have a new champion on Saturday.
It would be really interesting. It would be quite the I don't want to say quite the shock, because Adam Borks has the capabilities, to be a champion in this division. But look at the guy that he's facing. It's Patricio Pitbull. It is, again, the face of this promotion. And he's got the skills. We just saw him rebound from a championship loss. Now, the one thing that you can counter that argument with, Zain, is, again, there's a good argument that maybe he shouldn't be champion. That AJ McKee, who's competing in the co-main event of Bellator 286, should still be champion and should be the one facing Adam Borks. Because that second fight, very close. You could have judged a couple of those rounds either way. And if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, in my head, I had that second fight between Pitbull and McKee I had it 3-2 for McKee.
I did too, and that's why people were shocked when McKee wasn't announced as the winner. At least I was. So
I was too.
I would say, and we haven't gotten into best bets yet, but if you were to play it safe, over 2.5 rounds would be my bet.
Borks has the capability. Borks has the toughness. I know he lost to Caldwell in the first round, but going off of what you were saying before, Zan, I think he knows Pitbull is a grappling expert, and I think he knows going to the ground against Caldwell did him in that Grand Prix fight. He's not going.
Yes.
He's not going to do the same thing. He's going to try and keep this fight on the feet as long as possible, and he is going to do everything to ensure that if he does get caught on the ground, he's going to do everything to try and squirm away and get Pitbull out of position. So, over 2.5 rounds, little iffy. I wouldn't mind going with that one. But in terms of actually picking a winner, I got to go with Pitbull.
Me too.
I actually will go with a mid to late round finish. So just to combine with that previous bet, I would say 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th round finish.
Okay.
That is my prediction for this main event.
I can't disagree. And based on all of the MMA events that we just previewed, and I guess we could always add this, my MMA wish list for this weekend, if I could be at one MMA event this weekend, this would probably be the one.
Yeah, this is definitely the one to watch. Co-main event, again, interesting, because AJ McKee, despite losing his championship on a very controversial decision, is not going to get a trilogy bout with Patricio Pitbull. Instead, Pitbull will defend against Borix in the main event. McKee will have to settle for the co-main event, taking on somebody who UFC fans might know, Spike Carlyle.
Yeah, I think no disrespect to Spike Carlyle, but I think AJ McKee smokes him.
So this is a fight. Let's see. McKee's got the 2-inch height advantage, a 2-inch reach advantage, and McKee, I think, Zan, you will agree, kind of is going to be out for blood after losing his championship in such a controversial fashion and not getting a rematch.
Oh, this is the AJ McKee revenge tour starting Saturday night.
I like that expression, the AJ McKee revenge tour. Now, this is going to be Spike Carlyle's second fight in Bellator. He defeated Dan Murray via rear naked choke in his first bout. He actually had a decent start to his UFC career after going on a win streak in the LFA and LXF and Combate all around the regional scene, defeating Alan Cruz, but then losing decisions to Billy Quarantillo and Bill Algeo.
And at the time of the Alan Cruz win, Alan Cruz was one of those guys that Dana White had been looking at for several years. And I remember he had a lot of hype behind him, and he went into the Contender Series and won.
On short notice, I think.
And that was supposed to be like a coming out party for Cruz, and that didn't last long, if you recall.
And again, if I'm not mistaken, was that a short notice fight for Spike Carlyle?
I believe so, and he was like a massive underdog going in too. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, he's on a 5-fight win streak. He has his credibility, but like you kind of mentioned, AJ McKee is going to be on a revenge tour. None of those guys on the current 5-fight win streak he's on match McKee.
Maybe the only guy who seemed like a legitimate win to me was Dan Moret, but that was about it.
So this is definitely going to be an AJ McKee victory. As far as
it's just a matter of how and what round it'll be. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it'll be over pretty quickly. That's what I think.
Is there an over-under for a round? Because I would say if it's a 1.5, considering it would be a 3 rounds, I'd take an under.
I would too. I would take an under 2.5. If it's a
2.5, I'm definitely going an under.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of other fights. Since Bellator does only the 4-fight main cards, I might as well just go through the rest because UFC, again, not exactly the greatest this weekend. Aaron Pico, very interesting fight here at 145. Kind of like along the lines of the Pitbull Borgs fight. Aaron Pico, one of the biggest, prospects that Bellator has liked to promote, taking on a very talented Jeremy Kennedy.
Oh, yeah. And, Aaron Pico's resurrected his career. He's won his last 5 in a row. And it looked like it wasn't going to go well for him for a second a couple years ago when he first burst onto the scene in Bellator. He's obviously done very well ever since. You look at his fighter profile and who he's beaten his last couple. Justin Gonzalez, that's a notable win. John DeJesus was a devastating knockout. Edwards, though, in his last fight, that was easily the best that Pico has ever looked. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and I'll also say that I was just doing the little info to try to refresh my memory. I forgot Pico started at bantamweight, but the move up to featherweight has done absolute wonders for him. And I think Bellator also kind of realized they did make a mistake throwing him into the wolves so quickly, like putting him with Zach Freeman all those years ago.
And he lost to Adam Borix, who's fighting in the main event.
So, Henry Corrales, he also lost to. But as you mentioned, Borix, who's fighting in the main event now. So that technically is not a bad loss at all. And now he's on a 6-fight win streak. Now that Bellator has rightly built him up slowly over time. I say, speaking of McKee, who's also on this card, Zan, that Bellator did a fantastic job with building up McKee. Very slowly over time, getting him his first fights in Bellator. Not just first fight Bellator, first professional fights in 16, 17, 18. Then slowly giving him the tougher challenges, eventually leading into the Grand Prix where he ran through the Grand Prix, became a millionaire and a champion. AJ McKee had one of the best builds to, not just in Bellator MMA career, but an MMA career.
100%.
And you look at Jeremy Kennedy, by the way, coming in 17-3. So same amount of losses, but Kennedy with 7 more fights. He actually also has a loss to Borix, and he has a win over Manuel Sanchez at the end of last year.
He has a win over Matt Bissett, which I believe, you could correct me if I'm wrong, is he a Dana White Contender Series alum?
I can figure that out right here, but I believe he was. Actually, yes. Very first season of Dana White Contender Series. And then he actually had a couple of fights in the UFC anyway before getting cut.
See, I have a good memory because I'm one of those OG Contender Series watchers. So that name looked very familiar. So yeah.
So looking at this fight, Zan, I mean, do you see Kennedy's a bit of a step up compared to the names that were on that list for Pico on his current win streak? But do you see Pico still getting the job done?
I do.
I agree.
I could see it. I could see this going the distance, or I could see this, going under 2.5.
I'm gonna go with a distance prop. I say fight goes the distance, and I say Pico takes the decision.
Yeah, that's a solid pick. But don't be surprised if Jeremy Kennedy somehow, some way pulls it out. So.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Rounding out the main card, actually, should say opening the main card, we actually have another former champion in Guan Archuleta, who is taking on Enrique Barzola.
This is Barzola's biggest fight. You got Canadians fighting in back-to-back fights. Obviously the Canadian MMA region has not been the same since George St. Pierre retired. So maybe one of these two guys, with a couple more wins can kind of kickstart that area again. But I feel like this.
Sorry to interrupt, but interesting thing I'm noticing here on Tapology: 115, even odds.
That is bizarre.
I thought that the former champion would have been considered the favorite.
I would think so too, and I would think he would have been a slight favorite, but not a heavy favorite. But wouldn't you say that for sure this is a must-win for both guys, but for sure the pressure is on Archuleta? Would you not agree?
Oh, for sure. So Archuleta, I mean, he did defeat Patchy Mix for the championship, for the Bantamweight championship. Although if you remember, Zan, he had to come back from 2 rounds down.
That's
If
right.
Patchy Mix took any one of those last 3 rounds, Patchy Mix would have been Bellator Bantamweight champion.
That's right. And Patchy Mix almost knocked him out on several occasions, if you recall this well. So
Sergio Pettis, he lost the championship to, and then Rafion Stotts running through him with a 3rd round head kick knockout in the interim title fight. So this is going to be a big rebound fight for Juan Archuleta, but Enrique Barzola,
I just remember the Sergio Pettis fight was a complete domination by Pettis when they fought.
It was an absolute letdown of a performance. Archuleta, the American Kickboxing Academy product, he has a win over Darian Caldwell, and he fought Ronnie Yaha to draw right as the COVID pandemic was hitting at the UFC before, and that was his last fight in the UFC before going over to Bellator.
That's
has
right.
a win over Bobby Moffitt, fought Movsar Avolev, Gabriel Benitez.
Yeah, he had a somewhat decent UFC run when he was there, but he could just never string together those couple wins in a row to get him to the top 15.
And his most recent fight was a loss, although that loss was to Magomed Magomedov. That's not a bad loss.
No, it isn't.
I think, Zan, looking at their profiles, Archuleta, I know we said Archuleta has a lot of pressure. I think Archuleta has a lot more to lose than Enrique Barzola.
For sure, considering he's only won 2 out of his last 5, absolutely. Yeah.
And his title reign wasn't much. I mean, Barzola, even if he loses, another performance, another interesting performance against the top name, kind of like what his performance against Magomedov was, as long as he holds his own, his stock can still rise. Archuleta, he was a champion. Again, the championship run didn't exactly last. It wasn't exactly memorable. And now that's 2 straight title fights that he's lost. This is a big rebound fight he needs. But Zan, I think this is one considering the odds, considering everything, I might go against the grain. For some reason, I'm leaning towards Barzola on this one.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say a safer pick is that this fight doesn't go the distance.
I would take that bet more as a safer bet. For a best bet, I would say fight does not go the distance. I agree.
Just considering that these guys are 2 UFC veterans, it makes that fight that much bigger. So
let me now go out of the Bellator screen here to take us over to UFC Vegas 61. Just to run through the card pretty quickly, some interesting fights. Randy Costa, who is a prospect that I love.
I love him too. Absolutely.
He's going to be opening up the prelims against Guido Canetti. Julia Stolarenko is going to be on the prelims, as will Felipe Lenz, Brendan Allen, and Christoph Joko.
By the way,
this is one of those.
And by the way, just for people looking at that first fight in confusion, not to be confused with Joe Giannetti, 2 completely different spellings of the last name. I just had to mention that.
Zan, just looking at this card, the prelims look better than the main card. I think I'm more interested in the prelim card, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the prelim card looks pretty solid. And who doesn't love watching Francisco Trinaldo and Randy Brown fight? You know that those 2 are going to deliver fireworks.
That's an interesting co-main event. Sadiq Youssef, interesting name. Rayoni Barcelos and Trevin Jones. Main event of the prelims is going to be Alexei Olenek and Ilir Latifi.
Yeah, battle with the big points. And look at Alexei Olenek's record, a combined 77 MMA fights.
How is this man still going?
And he's still performing well for his age. It's incredible.
But our main event is going to be a strawweight bout between Mackenzie Dern and Xiaonan Yan, with Mackenzie Dern as the favorite.
Yeah, this is interesting. This feels like it could have a title shot written all over it, depending on how this fight goes in the near future. I think it's a bigger fight for Yan than it is for Dern.
Off my instincts, I agree with that. I want to double check their rankings as of right now. So, as of right now, women's, you got to scroll through to the bottom for whatever reason. This is going to be a 5-6 matchup. Dern at 5 and Jan at 6.
With how stacked the strawweight division is, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. How about you?
Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if the winner's going to get a title shot off of this fight alone, but I think it's going to whoever wins. Whoever loses that fight between Carla and Weili in November at the Garden, whoever loses that fight could potentially face the winner of this fight, or maybe the winner of this fight faces Rose Namajunas.
That's a possibility. What do you think will happen?
I think part of me wants to say Jan, but part of me, because I think Jan has some excellent skills, but part of me is thinking Mackenzie Dern's grappling is just going to be too much, as it always is.
I hear you.
I don't know if I can bet against Mackenzie Dern's grappling. I kind of would. Zan, this might be interesting for our best bets. I kind of want to go with this one. Don't go the distance. I know that's weird to say for women's MMA, but I don't know. Mackenzie Dern's grappling. I feel like Jan could catch her. Something about this fight tells me doesn't go the distance.
I like it to go over 2.5 rounds.
So, in other words, the even Steven pick for us would be a late third or fourth round finish, maybe by Dern.
Correct.
All right, interesting one. Anything you like on the UFC card? Because I mentioned it's not exactly exciting, although interesting names. Like I said, the prelims look actually pretty interesting compared to the main card.
At the moment, not really, but probably by Saturday, I'll be excited to watch the card. Yes. By the way, there's one that we're sleeping on. If you scroll down, I can tell you which one it is. Stoliarenko, who had that really quick submission win, either in her last fight or a couple of fights ago,
taking on somebody who's 4-1. Actually, I would put a pop on Stoliarenko. Stoliarenko by submission.
I like it a lot, and it feels like Krzysztof Jotko has been in the UFC forever. That's going to be. By the way, that is an MMA crime that Endon Allen versus Krzysztof Jotko is on the
a prelim fight,
not on the main card.
Can I add to the best bet? Jotko versus Allen maybe goes the distance. I think both of them are too tough to finish one another.
That's fair. So, given the amount of bets we have, what would you do as a single bet?
As a single bet?
Yes.
Like as a parlay or as a one best bet?
No, as a as bet, and then I want to know your best parlay.
Okay, my best bet would be Stoliarenko by submission.
Okay, and then what parlay would you do?
All right, I would take Stoliarenko by submission.
Wait, you would include her in the parlay too?
Oh no! Yeah, you're right. All right, so Stoliarenko by submission is my one bet. Let's go with Allen versus Jotko. Allen versus Jotko goes the distance. Yeah, I kind of want to go with Oleinik by submission. I feel like Latifi's not going to have it to defend off Oleinik.
Right, you'll just have to get the best odds for that, but I would agree with you.
And then for a main event, maybe an over, like you said, over 2.5 rounds, or substitute it with a Dern submission. Going with a submission special.
Okay, and if you parlayed all those and then you won, you'd be richer than what you started with. Let's just say that.
Fine by me. What about you?
Or hey, we'll go down for a second.
Okay.
If I were to be one of those crazy degenerates to bet every single fight,
God,
this is what this is what I would bet. I would bet Randy Costa money line. I would bet Julia Stoliarenko by submission. I would bet Felipe wins versus Maxim Grisham not to go the distance. I would
Okay.
bet Brendan Allen versus Christoph Jocko to go the distance. I would bet Joaquim Silva to finish Jesse Ronson. I would bet Jessica Penne money line. I would bet Alexia winning by submission. I would bet Mike Davis money line. I would bet Daniel Santos to beat John Castaneda. I would bet Sadiq Yusuf to finish Don Shanis. I would bet Hani Barcelos to to submit Trevin Jones. I would bet Andy Brown and Francisco Trinaldo not to go the distance, and I would bet Jan Moneyline as my final bet.
Ooh, I like that. That is a that is quite the opportunity.
$1 to maybe win about 4,000.
Hey, with a little bit of luck, you just might win.
Well, by the way, that's happened before. There's a very famous video that's like the greatest MMA bets of all time. And apparently there was a UFC Rio card that had Frank Mir on it, and every single underdog on the entire card won. There's also that famous UFC 249 parlay where the one better bet every single fight outcome correctly, including Justin Gaethje to beat Tony Ferguson in rounds 3, 4, and 5, and he was 30 seconds away from losing the entire parlay until they stopped the fight. So you never know.
You never know, indeed.
As they say, that's why these things happen in MMA.
Gentlemen, please, we're on national television.
That's true. That is a dark moment in all of MMA. And if you don't know what we're talking about,
I need an MMA soundboard. I pull stuff from the Empty the Bench soundboard, but the MMA Outsiders needs its own soundboard.
No, I would agree. Just with famous quotes or noises or what have you, it would be fantastic. But that'll do it. That'll conclude this episode of the MMA Outsiders. Tom, we're gonna have another weird week next week because there's gonna be no UFC next week either. But
gonna be tons of recap. Let's put it that way.
Right. So until then, make sure to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know every single time that this podcast airs, along with the Empty the Bench Network podcast, Fruity Cereal, all of the other podcasts that are featured on the Empty the Bench Network. You can find it all there. It's scrolling across the screen, but be sure to follow me. It's down there at Bando99 on Twitter and Instagram, and pretty much wherever else you have social media. I have my handle pretty much the same, and then you can follow Tom at Thomas J. Albano and at Tom Talk Sports 9 words, just his raw, uncut sports takes.
Don't forget our show at MMA Outsiders ETV on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and at ETV Network for everything Empty the Bench Network related, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
100%, and we would not be remiss as if to say we're just grateful for the support so far through 8 episodes. We hope to continue to do this for as long as we can. Again, you can find our work respectively on Fansided MMA for Tom, and then for myself at bjpenn.com and all of that. And to conclude, we just wanted to remind you guys, as you go into your MMA fix this weekend with a lot of different MMA to watch, be Joe Pyfer, please, and maybe just maybe hashtag support the sport and watch as much MMA as you can this weekend.
And hashtag save the flyweights.
And yes, yes, and
hashtag free Ariel.
Yeah, hashtag free Ariel and the last one the last I was gonna say was and hashtag just bleed, because of course. But yeah, thank you again for watching this episode. This was incredibly entertaining. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will be back next week to do a lot of recapping of a lot of Bellator, a lot of UFC, and maybe an interesting one card. We'll see how it plays out.
So for Zan Bando, I'm Tom Albano. Until next week, see you soon, boy.